without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Paul Prestwich.
Thank you, I'm really happy to be here, and it's been a real joy to work with Doug this year. He has done such a great job on this project. He's an outstanding student. I know that many of you know him, and some of you know him really well. But he is a really accomplished person in so many ways, and working with him on this was almost like, I was just along for the ride in some ways, because he just has done such a remarkable job and has so many great ideas. So if you ever want to know what the future holds for our society, you can look at someone like him, because he really is an outstanding person. Today, I'm really excited to be here. And before I get into my topic and what I want to talk about, I was thinking back to a story that our son Sam told us. And Sam is here. We have 5 children, and a couple of them are with us, are with me here this evening. When Sam was in 5th grade, he came home from one of the first days of school, or kind of early in the school year, and he told this story. He said his teacher stood up and he said, now these are 5th graders, he said, this year you're going to experience something that none of you have ever experienced before. Does anyone know what that is? One little girl raised her hand and she said, puberty? And he said, no, classroom representatives. I love that story because, like with leadership, 5th grade is the same way. You really don't know what's coming around the bend. And just like those 5th graders learned, with leadership, as with anything else, there's always something new to learn. There is something new that we need to kind of keep in mind. And so what I want to talk about today is the importance of leaders, for leaders, to take complicated situations and come up with simple solutions. Now, the Irish playwright George Bernard Shaw said, for every complicated situation, there is a simple solution that's wrong. But Leonardo da Vinci said, simplicity is the ultimate sophistication. Now, I do believe that one of the greatest things that we can do as leaders is to create and communicate simple solutions out of chaos. And we live in a society that's very complicated in so many ways. But when we can arrive at, help others arrive at, simple solutions that then we can communicate, we can do really powerful things. Now, if you if you question whether simplicity is a great thing, think about the concept of Twitter. Now, one of the things that I think about with a lot of social media is when at first, a lot of social media kind of platforms and ideas that first came out, for a lot of them I think that is one of the craziest ideas I've ever heard. Which is why I'm probably never going to be a social media, and I'm not going to be the next Mark Zuckerberg or the guy who invented Twitter or whatever. But Twitter is powerful because of the simplicity of the message. Now, I don't know if it creates necessarily simplistic solutions, but it does show you the powerful nature of being able to communicate something in a simple way. So tonight what I want to talk about is why we need to create simple solutions, and how do we go about doing that? Now, there are a few reasons that simple solutions are so important. But before we talk about those, let's talk about what a simple solution isn't. Sometimes it's important to define what something is by defining what it is not. A simple solution is not necessarily just the easiest alternative. There are things that are easy. Dr. Haddad talked about the idea of integrity. One of the easiest things to do is to lose your integrity. To go down kind of the simple path that really leads us to what might be kind of a short-term gain for a long-term negative kind of thing. So a simple solution is not the easiest alternative. A simple solution is not the one that requires the least amount of money. Sometimes simple solutions, in fact, are some of the most expensive things that we can do. A simple solution is not one that requires the most technology. There have been so many times where I've been in kind of a leadership environment, leading a team where the solution that people throw out is just some kind of complicated technological solution, quote unquote, solution. The reality is that most gains in organizations, technology might have a part of it, but it's rarely the chief driver of the solution. But so often in businesses, I worked a lot of nonprofit organizations, what we talk about is really, throwing out some technological idea and hoping that it leads to a great gain. Now, technology can be used in really powerful, effective ways that can move an organization forward, but it's not the solution necessarily itself. It's really a way to get at what the solution is. One of my favorite examples of a simple solution comes from my world, the world of higher education. I worked at a lot of different colleges and universities over the course of many, many years. One of the very best solutions that I ever saw to a problem was a small community college that was looking for a way to grow and expand its enrollment. And it was a relatively young college. There are higher education institutions in the United States that are, hundreds and hundreds of years old. This one was really only 20 or 25 years old, which in higher ed terms is just a baby. It's just tiny. Well, they were struggling to kind of reach a new audience and really grow and really to serve their local community. So the president there, many colleges start their fall semesters sometimes fairly early in August. Sometimes kind of the midpoint of August, and they can be going to have classes for 2 or 3 weeks even before Labor Day hits. Well, this president decided that year they were going to completely scrap that calendar. They were going to start their fall semester the day after Labor Day. Now you might think, what difference does that make? Well, he had gone to a conference where he had learned from another college that when they had started after Labor Day, their enrollment dramatically increased. They had something like a 33% enrollment growth in 1 year. Now, why is that the case? So this college enacted that schedule. Now, what you have to remember with higher education is Woodrow Wilson was the president of Princeton University before he was the United States president, and he said something like, the only thing that's more difficult to change than the university is a graveyard. Higher ed changes at a really slow pace, very often. And so it's tough to change. Even something like the academic calendar can be like sacred, we've done it like this for many, many years, and so we're going to keep doing it the same way. And so this college in question changed their calendar by just 2 or 3 weeks and had that same dramatic enrollment growth. Now, the amazing thing about it is that enrollment in higher education is really complicated. One of the complicated things about changing higher education is that, Bobby King talked about cycles and the cycles of organizations. Higher education has one main start a year. Now, of course, there are many different semesters, but there's one big start, and that's once every year. And so oftentimes you don't know how well something works, especially from an enrollment standpoint, until the next year. And sometimes you really don't know it for many, many years. And so you can kind of nibble at the edges. And that's what happens oftentimes in organizations. They nibble at the edges to try to get incremental growth, when really what they need is a simple breakthrough idea. That college experienced that breakthrough idea by taking a complicated situation, enrollment, and how to manage enrollment and recruit students, and developing a real breakout idea. Now, one of the amazing things about simple solutions is that when we have, the more complicated something is, the more chances there are that doesn't work well. From an engineering standpoint, the more moving parts there are, if any one of those moving parts doesn't click right, doesn't work right, then the whole organization can struggle. And so when we create simple solutions, we can move from the idea of complication and where there are multiple opportunities for things to go wrong, to a situation where it's streamlined and we're moving forward in a really positive way. When we have complicated situations, we can be much less efficient than we need to be. You know, if we also go from the idea of engineering, the more moving parts there are, the more energy is lost due to friction in those moving parts. And so the simpler that we make solutions, the more efficient we are because there are less opportunities for friction. And friction, from an engineering standpoint, can rob a machine of its energy, and it can rob an organization of its energy as well. So let's talk for a moment then about what are the most effective strategies to create simple solutions. Now, there are a lot of things that an organization can do to reach breakthrough ideas. And I'll talk for a moment, in a moment, about some of those, but before we even think about what can make an organization effective, we need to think about three things. I learned these three principles, from my first doctoral advisor at the University of Pennsylvania. He's recently passed away a few years ago. Wonderful guy named George Keller. George Keller wrote a really influential book in higher education called Academic Strategy, and it was a real leading book in terms of teaching mostly college and university administrators and faculty how to engage in effective strategic planning. But he said, before we come up with innovative ideas, before we come up with great plans and great strategies, our organization needs three things: information, great information about itself, quality, and the right people. And I've thought about this so many times. He said, it doesn't matter what your plan is like if you don't understand your organization through information, if you don't promote the highest of quality of your product, quality of the working environment, quality of the organization itself, it doesn't matter how good your plan is, you're not going to be as effective as you can be. And then finally, having the right people. You know, getting the right people on board with an idea is a great way not only to be successful in terms of living out the ideas and the mission that you have, but also coming up with those breakthrough ideas. Because as any good leader knows, you're not going to be the one that always has the great ideas. Hopefully you're generating really positive, good solutions, but you should also be creating an environment where those great people where those ideas can bubble up, where they can come to the forefront, where it's supported and recognized in a way that can lead the organization forward in a really positive way. You know, one of my favorite examples of an individual who exhibited quality and was really the right person for the job was Florence Nightingale. Now, Florence Nightingale, many people are aware of her, but you know, as time wears on, sometimes some of the great examples of the past are lost somewhat. Florence Nightingale was kind of a contemporary of Abraham Lincoln, who also had one of my favorite quotes related to this. He said, we always need to remember, this was I think when he was campaigning for the presidency in 1860, he said, let us always remember that right makes might. And that in the end, let us dare to do our duty as we understand it. Now, Florence Nightingale was a great example of that. They were peers. She was born into aristocracy in Great Britain. She was, kind of had a very comfortable lifestyle, but the expectation for her was to live that lifestyle. But much to the chagrin of many of her family members, she decided that she wanted to become a nurse. And one of her early assignments was to go to an area that is receiving a lot of world attention now. She went to the Crimean Peninsula during the Crimean War and was assigned at a military hospital. What she found when she got there was one of the most horrific situations. I can't even imagine how bad it was. But one of her fellow nurses called it horror upon horror. Not just because of the injuries that they saw, but how they were treated, how those soldiers who were suffering were treated. There were dead bodies that would be allowed to rot on the floor for days. The medicines were in short supply. There was a great indifference among many of the medical staff there towards the suffering soldiers. The sanitary conditions were absolutely horrible. People estimated that there were 4 miles, if you stacked the beds up, that there were 4 miles of beds in that hospital. Now, many people seeing that kind of situation, in the situation that she was in, where she was not necessarily what we would call the leader in that organization. She had kind of a rank and file position. But what she did was not only change the lives and the conditions of those soldiers who were suffering there, but she changed healthcare forever because she dared to do her duty. She went about changing everything as much as she could about the operation. And so from the time that she left, by the time she left, situations had improved dramatically. Sanitation conditions were improved. The way that they treated the soldiers improved significantly. And now she's known really in many ways as the mother of not only the nursing practice, but in many ways healthcare in general. She dared to do her duty. Now, that is a way to create a breakthrough. Daring to do our duty. That's a simple solution. Now, keep in mind that a solution might be simple. The way that it's implemented might be very complex. You know, I'm sure that the technology behind Twitter is very complicated in many ways, but the idea is a simple one. But when we dare to do our duty, we can create simple solutions out of really challenging situations. The second thing that we need to do when we dare to do, in addition to daring to do our duty to create simple solutions, is to focus on speed. You know, Jack Welch, who was the CEO of GE for many years, I think 2 decades, said speed is the indispensable ingredient of competitiveness. And it doesn't matter what kind of business we're in. I was in the nonprofit world for a lot of years. We were still in competition with other kinds of colleges and universities and even non-higher education institutions. Speed can make a big difference in the long-term success of an organization. And sometimes it's so easy, and I come from a world that really, it can move at really a slow pace, where the way that we address, you know, we come up with complicated situations. A lot of times it was, let's create a committee. And I've even seen colleges that had committees on committees. That's what they're called, the committee of committees. It's the committee that manages other committees and decides how many committees we need to have and all the different kind of organizations that we need to have. But at the same time, whether it's a nonprofit organization like the kind that I've worked in, or a business, or whatever the case may be, in that realm, speed makes a difference. The quicker that we can make decisions that lead to positive breakthrough solutions, the better off we're going to be. And then finally, in addition to daring to do our duty and practicing speed, we need to innovate courageously. Now, we've heard some wonderful things about innovation tonight and about what that means from a leadership standpoint. And I'm going to talk about a couple of principles related to innovation. The first thing to keep in mind that so many people miss out on, I've fallen prey to this thinking as well, is that innovation and creativity is mostly not genetic. So often we might say, I'm not a creative person. My father, who's here with us tonight, is a wonderful artist. He's very creative in terms of art. It's wonderful. I look on that and I think there was a genetic disposition, but the way that that has been honed is 70 plus years of working it, of experimenting and doing it and living it and breathing it in a very passionate way. You know, a wonderful study of identical twins, one of the great ways that researchers have of learning about genetic influences on behavior is through the study of identical twins, because they obviously have the same genetic background. So what a study found is that in terms of creativity, only about 30% of someone's ability to create is based on genetics. 70% is based on other things. 30% is almost nothing in the big scheme of things. It doesn't make a difference. It shouldn't make a difference. I guess the point is that just like leaders are not born, we're not born a leader or not a leader, the same thing is the case for innovators. We're not born an innovator. We're not born creative. We might be born with certain dispositions to be slightly better than others at some things. But the reality is that most of innovation really comes from the decisions that we make. Do we want to be innovative? Do we want to pursue that? Do we want to do that? Do we want to live that? Or not? Now, one of the wonderful, or a couple of great things to think about also in terms of innovation is the power of questions. I love Maureen's talk about the questions that we need to be asking ourselves. There are two great ideas that come from some of the best business leaders have to do with questions that great leaders ask. You know, Steve Jobs was famous for asking kind of simple questions. You know, and almost like, well, why can't we do that? You know, why does a computer need a fan? Why does this need that? Why do you need an on-off switch? Why? You know, sometimes when we're parents, those questions from our children can become, you know, especially with some kids, why? Well, why is this? Well, why is that? Well, why are Snickers, do they come in a package like this? Why isn't it, you know, this? Why isn't it this? You know, finally, you know, you say, well, go ask your mother. You know? She's got all the answers. But the reality is that children are asking those questions because some of it is they're wanting to know about the world, but some of it is they're, you know, in their mind they're trying to sort some things out. You know, why does something exist? You know, when we're leaders, we should be asking those questions. Not only why are we doing this, but hey, how can we do it better? You know, and then listening to those responses and really learning from what people say to us. You know, why do we do this? Why? How can we do it better? And so we need to understand that we need to have the courage to question, to ask the questions. We also need to have the courage to implement, based on the great research that comes up through, you know, from the ideas, the opinions, the analysis, can become, you know, especially with some kids, why? Well, why is this? Well, why is that? Well, why are Snickers, do they come in a package like this? Why isn't it, you know, this? Why isn't it this? You know, finally, you know, you say, well, go ask your mother. You know? She's got all the answers. But the reality is that children are asking those questions because some of it is they're wanting to know about the world, but some of it is they're, you know, in their mind they're trying to sort some things out. You know, why does something exist? You know, when we're leaders, we should be asking those questions. Not only why are we doing this, but hey, how can we do it better? You know, and then listening to those responses and really learning from what people say to us. You know, why do we do this? Why? How can we do it better? And so we need to understand that we need to have the courage to question, to ask the questions. We also need to have the courage to implement, based on the great research that comes up through, you know, from the ideas, the opinions, the analysis that come to us from the various people with whom we work. We need to be courageously implementing those simple solutions. You know, when I was a college president, there was a new program idea that had been talked about at my college for a lot of years. And all of the research showed that if we implemented this program, our enrollment was going to increase. And again, I mean, you know, there's a reason that higher education talks about enrollment. It's one of the chief ways that we survive is through having good, solid enrollment. You know, we gain tuition from that and fees and so forth. But it can also, not just from a financial standpoint, but can really create a robust environment when we're growing and developing as an organization. And so we did the analysis, the cost-benefit analysis. It certainly hadn't been my idea. It had come from someone else and had been talked about for quite a while. It was a great programmatical idea, and yet over the course of many years, it had been talked about and it had not been done because there was a certain faction that didn't want the program. And so we did all the analysis and everything showed this is something that we need to do. And so we did it. We pushed it through the governance process, the decision-making process, got the program approved by our board of trustees, and I remember someone on my executive team said something that I remember to this day. She said, you know, there was a time when we just wouldn't have had the guts to do this. And now, she goes, I feel so much better because we decided to act. We decided to say, it's okay if not everyone's in favor of this, but it's the right thing to do, and we're going to do that. And you know what? When it comes to being a great leader, there are times when we just need to stand up and say, we've asked all the questions, we've done the analysis, it's time to act, and we're going to do the right thing, we're going to act, and we're going to implement courageously. So one of the great things that we can do is to implement in a very courageous way. In spite of the naysayers, in spite of those who would really put the idea down and try to block it and be the roadblock in the way. You know, over the course of my career, the times when I felt the best about the way that the organization is moving forward, whether it was my department or whether it was an institution as a whole, you know, so often it's when it's been as a result of simple solutions that are easy to communicate, easy to rally people around, and really, in a way, cutting through all of the noise and the absolute chaos that can sometimes exist both internally in an organization and outside of the organization. And so when we keep those things in mind, when we build on a foundation of information, quality, and the right people, when we dare to do our duty, when we act with speed, and when we innovate courageously and with conviction, we can do great things. I really appreciate you all being here this evening. I thanks Doug so much for putting this on. Thanks also to Carrie Adams, I don't know if there you are here, who does such a wonderful job working with the Leadership Academy students to do that, because so many of these students are doing what we've talked about tonight. So many of them, they are living what some of the recommendations that we've talked about from this stage. So I commend all of them. Some of them are here this evening. They do a great job. So have a good rest of the evening. Thank you.